1. Introduction. RAWSEP view. The United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only. For home building and furniture building. For just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions, yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry, and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable. Wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree, but it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut-down and burned tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM 2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lungs, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM 2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom, the Eco-Design Wood Stove and International Convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. RAWSEP view. Purple air. PM 2.5 monitors hanging from the eaves of the house of a near neighbor should be used to measure the level of PM 2.5 in the air hyperlocally in the yards of near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners. If PM 2.5 levels exceed World Health Organization standards of 5 micrograms per cubic meter annually, then that evidence of air pollution from wood burning should lead to the shutdown of that indoor residential wood burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary.
Hi, my name is Lily. Andrew gave you the intro to Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates and their concern for air pollution from indoor residential wood burning. Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates, or RAWSEP, would like every near neighbor of an indoor residential wood burner whose wood smoke enters their yards and sickens the near neighbors to have a purple air PM 2.5 monitor hanging from the eaves of their home to measure the level of PM 2.5 entering their yards. That measurement of air pollution should be used as evidence of unnecessary air pollution, and each indoor residential wood burner should be shut down based on that evidence, one indoor residential wood burner at a time if necessary. The presentation by Andrew ended at 2 minutes 5 seconds. The same presentation by Emma starts at 2 minutes 3 seconds before the end of this podcast. So I am Lily, your timekeeper, and you can start the next podcast at 2 minutes 5 seconds in if you would not like to see the presentation by Andrew a second time. This presentation by me, Lily, ends at 5 minutes in. What you will see in the main content of this RAWSEP podcast will be news about air pollution from indoor residential wood burning and how that air pollution is being combated by ordinary people just like you who are unfortunately near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners at this time. There will also be news about unnecessary and highly polluting use of wood as fuel in industrial wood burners and preventable air pollution from wood burning wildfires. There will also be news about air pollution from PM 2.5 from gas-powered cars. There will also be news about airborne diseases which are also preventable with vaccines such as COVID-19 and measles and whooping cough, to name just a few. In 2025, Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates is also concerned with combating the Trump destruction of government funding for programs which protect human health through the Department of Health and Human Services, and Trump destruction of programs which fund the science and medical research plan to protect human health from preventable illnesses. Protecting human health is a patriotic act, and our defense against enemies is weakened if we are not as healthy as we can be. Heat pump rebates are now offered by the federal government, distributed through the eligible United States, are available in 2025, and are the best, cleanest, and now cheapest alternative to indoor residential wood burning if that burning is actually done to purportedly save money. Wind and solar as sources of the electricity that powers heat pumps and electric cars is also cheaper than burning wood. The adverse health effects that are caused by indoor residential wood burning also come at a cost to near neighbors, both in shortening and ending their lives, and in actual hospital, clinic, and funeral costs. Instead of being compensated monetarily, near neighbors should instead be able to achieve immediate relief by stopping indoor residential wood burning in their hyper-localized neighborhoods, which relief readings from purple air PM 2.5 monitors used as evidence of air pollution will help them achieve. Welcome to news about hopeful scientific and medical achievements that will also help us achieve the goal of clean air to breathe.
Webisode 57DHXXE September 6, 2025 RFK Jr. floats Tylenol untruth at COVID-19 vaccine hearing. In episode 57DHXXE 11 RFK Jr. tries to float a distraction to Tylenol when the deadly serious subject is RFK denial of the COVID-19 vaccine to millions of Americans just as COVID-19 season ramps up to Utah. You can all just die part 14, the crackpot nation of RFK Jr. and Trump food dyes are an issue, but are a minor issue. 3 Wisconsin Vance comes to law. Crosse to show us what reprehensible really means for Iowa. A small but telling moment in the RFK Jr. hearing. RFK Jr. favors big agriculture before small farmers. 5 headlines. Main content. 1. RFK Jr. tries to float a distraction to Tylenol when the deadly serious subject is RFK denial of the COVID-19 vaccine to millions of Americans just as COVID-19 season ramps up. Excerpt edited by RAWSEP residents against Would smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization for brevity and clarity inside medicine. September 6, 2025 Tylenol has entered the chat. RFK Jr. wants to link it to autism even though the best evidence says otherwise. It is not pseudoscience. But it is not settled either, nor is it safe to assume otherwise. Inside Medicine newsletter Jeremy Faust, MD. September 6, 2025 The Wall Street Journal reported that the RFK Jr. forthcoming report on what causes autism will pin some of the blame on prenatal exposure to Tylenol. Would that conclusion be accurate? Unlikely. Is it a problem if this becomes our national stance on the issue? Yes, let us go inside medicine, not pseudoscience, but nowhere near conclusive. Unlike many RFK Jr. community claims a link between autism and Tylenol is not complete. Garbage. Note, I will be using Tylenol here, but this all applies to the generic versions too, known as acetaminophen in the US and paracetamol in some other countries. In fact, researchers including at Harvard and Yale have published epidemiological studies pointing towards an association, but a 2024 study from Sweden published in the Journal of the American Medical Association provided what looks to have been a devastating rebuttal to the thought. The Swedish team elegantly cut through the noise by simply comparing outcomes among siblings. That was a clever natural experiment, and it was novel to this question. Using that approach inherently removed most of the confounding variables such as the genetics of the mothers and other risk factors. The Tylenol and autism link fell apart. While even that study was not perfect, there is convincing evidence that its methods were adequate to the task. That paper does not definitively end the debate, though honestly it might, but it certainly says that the research showing a link between Tylenol and autism has a much steeper hill to climb before we would accept it, let alone make national policy. For one thing, the Swedish researchers were able to replicate the findings of older studies, and this is key. When the sibling control method was not deployed, that means that for whatever limitations the Swedish study had, including that it only covered Tylenol that doctors prescribed rather than over-the-counter use, its methods were similar enough to detect the association that previous researchers had reported. So had they not deployed the sibling control method, the Swedish team also would have found the link. I find that to be compelling. Why invoking the precautionary principle does not fly? Let us say the Swedish study is inadequate. That is neither incorrect nor sufficient to slam the door shut on the issue. Why not tell pregnant women to avoid Tylenol just to be on the safe side? The so-called precautionary principle. The answer is twofold. First, crying wolf is inherently bad. You know how that story ends. Second, it is not even clear that this advice would be erring on the safe side. There is some data to suggest that fevers during pregnancy are linked to autism down the road. And get this, using fever-reducing medications like Tylenol appears to break that link if we believe that the guidance stemming from the precautionary principle would be reversed. Other reasons why this is bad. There are at least 3 reasons why it would be bad national policy to link autism and prenatal Tylenol use based on what we know now. 1 is that this inappropriately blames mothers, which may be the point, but the other 2 reasons are more dangerous. First, it is likely that the HHS report on autism will also blame some vaccines. We know this because RFK Jr. had a pathetic meltdown on X/Twitter when a recent Danish study yet again debunked any link between vaccines and an array of neurological conditions by throwing in some non-vaccine scapegoats. It may look like the secretary is being even-handed rather than just taking on vaccines. Second, we seem to be entering a new phase of American science wherein cherry-picked studies are used to prove something, while others, often better science by the way, are ignored or wrongly dismissed. That is not gold standard science. Rather, as my colleague Dr. Bill Hainage says, in the place of evidence-based policymaking it is. Policy-based evidence making. In a way, what worries me is that this is not pseudoscience, it is just not ready for primetime science. And as above, if we get this backwards, we could cause as much or more harm. This throws the precautionary principle out the window. Tylenol deserves scrutiny, though none of this negates another inconvenient truth. By the way, Tylenol, all acetaminophen, is probably the single most dangerous over-the-counter medication on the market. Aspirin may be more dangerous, but it is used less these days. While millions of people routinely use the medication safely every year, there are thousands of people who develop liver damage and hundreds who die from overdoses, including many unintentional ones. I refer you to the deeply reported and riveting new book, No More Tears by Gardner Harris. You will be absolutely shocked by the Johnson & Johnson behavior on the issue of Tylenol safety and others over the years. Should there be a more prominent warning to patients on the box? I would say yes. Does that mean that we should accept some strange bedfellows and passively accept this purported link between autism and prenatal Tylenol used to achieve that goal? No, despite what this administration does, despite what it mistakenly believes is gold standard science, genuinely rigorous scientific processes still matter. To Utah, you can all just die part 14, the crackpot nation of RFK Jr. and Trump food dyes are an issue, but are a minor issue. Excerpt edited by RAWSEP residents against Would smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization for brevity and clarity. Brian Munch, Facebook, post September 5, 2025. It is one thing if individual Americans want to commit themselves to a life warped and endangered by conspiracy theories, 16th century level scientific nonsense, and witchcraft. But it is quite another thing if an entire country is forced to live under that witchcraft because its leaders are so dishonest, ignorant grifters, or blinded by their political ambition that they are willing to enforce a public policy on everyone else that will absolutely kill people en masse. And that is where we are now in the United States. Yes, Big Pharma has too much of an influence on our public health and medical practice. We should forbid direct-to-consumer advertising of drugs. Only one other country in the world allows that food dyes are an issue, but a minor one. Yes, industrial agriculture and processed foods are riddled with hazardous pesticides and other chemicals, but the Trump administration is doing nothing about those systematic flaws. In fact, RFK Jr. appointees running the EPA and FDA are making that problem even worse, but every day we see more evidence that the Trump top health official RFK Jr., like Trump himself, is a psychopath. Crackpot, a charlatan and a grifter. Dr. Oz is also a crackpot and a grifter. The Surgeon General of Florida, Dr. Joseph Ladapo, is also a crackpot under the supervision of Governor Ron DeSantis, who is not a crackpot, but a craven political opportunist. Now that MAGA-infected Florida is going to eliminate mandatory vaccines for school children, I would be terrified to be a parent in Florida, and I would move out of the state if at all possible. Undoubtedly, that insanity will spread to other MAGA states, including Utah. This is all an insane capitulation to Trump and Trumpism. DeSantis knows better. He is a Yale and Harvard Law School graduate. Not that the Ivy League does not produce morons, fraudsters, and people who are morally bankrupt, but on the part of DeSantis, it is purely a cynical political calculation, not a decision based on a credible side of a legitimate controversy in science. RFK Jr. has replaced the scientific advisory panel on vaccines with even more crackpots. Insurance companies will not pay for vaccines not recommended by the CDC, assuming his hand-picked panel of like-minded crackpots do what we expect them to do. Then you can kiss goodbye your opportunity to get a COVID booster or maybe even any other vaccine. If you recall, some bigwig politicians in Utah cheered the Trump Justice Department dropping charges on a Utah physician charlatan who had thrown away vaccines and sold thousands of fake vaccination cards. Dr. Michael Moore went so far as to inject saline into the arms of children at the request of parents so the children would think they had been vaccinated, and he was celebrated by the Speaker of the House for Utah, Mike Schultz, and Republican Utah Senator Mike Lee, among others, as a hero. Just like witchcraft got people killed in the Middle Ages, 21st century witchcraft will get a lot of people killed. The Surgeon General for Trump said mRNA vaccine technology saved over 2 million lives from COVID. Of the over 1 million people who actually died from COVID, it was not just the elderly and immunocompromised who succumbed or suffered long-term morbidity and disability. Blue states are beginning to form their own alliances on vaccines consistent with actual science. For example, their own CDC. Do not count on Utah joining that alliance. Democracy depends on people accepting the responsibility of social contract. When vaccination rates are low, viruses like COVID that can mutate hang around longer and have a better opportunity for mutating into new forms, prolonging and spreading the disease. With our federal and state government dominated by the MAGA moral construct of I am the only person that matters, combined with a revival of the medieval scientific sophistication of let us go burn some witches and kill all the cats. Welcome to the dark ages of Make America Great Again. Here is a little homework assignment. Trump loves firing people. Call the White House switch board and tell Trump to fire RFK Jr. as soon as possible. ASAP. 202-4456-1111. 3. Wisconsin Vance comes to La Crosse to show us what reprehensible really means. RAWSEP view from the Cambridge Dictionary. What does reprehensible mean in simple words? Reprehensible means deserving of blame or strong criticism. It is a strong word. Your mother might forgive you for doing something bad, but something reprehensible, that is worse. If a politician steals funds that are meant to provide care for the elderly, that is reprehensible. Excerpt edited by RAWSEP. Residents Against Would Smoke Emission Particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization for brevity and clarity. The Capital Times, September 5th, 2025. Many would benefit should Donald Trump meet an untimely end, but no one would benefit more than J.D. Vance, the man who now serves as vice president under the man he once compared to Hitler. Wants you to get used to the idea that he is itching to occupy the gold-plated Oval Office if Trump, whose health is coming under increasing scrutiny, suddenly keels over. Yes, terrible tragedies happen, Vance told USA Today last week, but I feel very confident the President of the United States is in good shape, is going to serve out the remainder of his term and do great things for the American people. And if God forbid there is a terrible tragedy, I cannot think of better on-the-job training than what I have gotten over the last 200 days. Vance is a political opportunist of the highest order. He opposed Trump when he thought it was in his interest to do so. When that did not work out, he embraced the man he had earlier publicly called an idiot and derided as reprehensible. So you would do well to remember that when Vance comes to Wisconsin to tout the benefits of Trump policies on ordinary working folks, he is only doing what benefits Trump and consequently himself. Vance came to La Crosse last week to talk up the benefits of the Trump One Big Beautiful Bill La Crosse is part of. The House District of Republican U.S. Representative Derek Van Orden, and Van Orden backed the bill despite that fact that it will devastate the farmers and low-earning families in the Van Orden district. Consequently, Van Orden, who narrowly hung onto his 3rd congressional district seat in 2024, is on extremely shaky ground for 2026. The Trump Big Ugly Bill slashes funding for Medicaid and hunger mitigation programs in order to fund massive tax cuts for Republican billionaires such as the Vance longtime benefactor Silicon Valley billionaire Peter Thiel. We write Vance tried during his La Crosse visit to foster the fantasy that voters in the Van Orden district should be happy that rich people like Vance, Thiel, and Trump will enjoy a windfall, and he peddled the trickle-down lie that there might be some minimal benefit to people who are not millionaires. But remember, Vance is a charlatan, and the spin he spewed in La Crosse was a slurry of misinformation and outright lies. Vance was right about Trump. He possesses preternatural political instincts, and he is adept at turning the trappings of office into a personal fortune. But when it comes to governing, he is an idiot, and as he has demonstrated with his revenge politics, his disregard for subjects constituents, and his brazen corruption, he is certainly reprehensible, while the calculating Vance is certainly not an idiot. His self-serving embrace of the Trump ruination of America is certainly reprehensible. For Iowa, a small but telling moment in the RFK Jr. Hearing RFK Jr. favors big agriculture before small farmers. RAWSEP. He excerpt. Unlike the RFK Jr. combative responses about the corruption of the Center for Disease Control CDC officials, he fired RFK Jr. talked about different priorities of his, but assured Republican Iowa Senator Charles Grassley that he RFK Jr. was making sure the MAHA agenda is consistent with agenda of farmers, including big agriculture. RFK Jr. added, "We are consulting every stakeholder in the farm community, and everything that we do the exchange is revealing because it suggests that RFK Jr. is quite willing to play ball with big agriculture, even at the risk of angering his grassroots Make America Healthy Again supporters who may be small farmers themselves." RAWSEP. View RFK Jr. threat to mRNA vaccine research and denial of COVID-19. Access to most Americans this fall is the clear and present danger of RFK Jr. If that was not clear to most Americans, it was clear after this September 3rd, 2025 hearing. This article points to cracks in RFK Jr. support from MAHA concerned about the environment and the overreach of big agriculture in pursuing profits at the cost of human health. The second crack appears to be physicians who are Republican United States senators, including Republican Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana and Republican Senator John Barrasso of Nevada. Excerpt edited by RAWSEP. Residents Against Would Smoke Emission Particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization for brevity and clarity. The New York Times, September 4th, 2025. There was a lot of yelling in the Senate on Thursday morning when the Health and Human Services Secretary RFK Jr. came to defend the many boneheaded decisions he had made recently. Those choices include his firing of Susan Menarez, the director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, who says she was let go because she refused to approve people who had made anti-vaccine statements to a vaccine advisory panel, the Trump Food and Drug Administration, restricting access to the COVID vaccine against the recommendations of scientists, and his canceling of almost $500 million in mRNA vaccine contracts. Senator Ron Wyden of Oregon accused RFK Jr. of filling his organization with a cavalcade of conspiracy theorists, crackpots, and grifters. I had anticipated that Democrats like Wyden, who have always been opposed to RFK Jr., a longtime vaccine cynic, would come out swinging. What was a bit more unexpected was a quieter exchange between RFK Jr. and Charles Grassley, Republican of Iowa. Grassley said that Iowa farmers had expressed concerns regarding some of the RFK Jr. statements and asked him for a commitment to staying in his lane when it comes to regulating agriculture and the environment. Unlike the RFK Jr. combative responses about the corruption of the CDC officials, he talked about different priorities of his, but assured Grassley that he was making sure the MAHA agenda is consistent with the agenda of farmers. RFK Jr. added, "We are consulting every stakeholder in the farm community, and everything that we do the exchange is revealing because it suggests that RFK Jr. is quite willing to play ball with big agriculture, even at the risk of angering his grassroots Make America Healthy Again supporters." Many of his MAHA faithful were already disappointed in the RFK Jr. capitulation on the environment, but in this September 3rd, 2025 hearing, the words were coming right out of the RFK Jr. mouth, not from a leaked draft that offered him plausible deniability. If he said it was written by others, there were other cracks in the foundation of the RFK Jr. support. A handful of Republican senators, including Bill Cassidy and John Barrasso, who are physicians, asked tough questions about his statements about vaccines and the potential for changes. Barrasso told RFK Jr. there are real concerns that safe, proven vaccines like measles, like hepatitis B, could be in jeopardy, that could put Americans at risk and reverse decades of progress. How I wish these senators had expressed these concerns in January when they voted to confirm RFK Jr. for his post. While the criticism of RFK Jr. slowly grows from different sides, I fear it is too little too late. Considerable damage has already been done to American trust in vaccines under false pretenses. A veterinarian recently told NBC News about people expressing their concerns to her about giving their pets vaccines out of fear that they will harm their pets, causing autism or other cognitive issues. When people are afraid of dog autism, it is going to take a lot more than some harsh words at a little watch Senate hearing to get us back on track. Headlines: The New York Times, September 6th. 2025 air pollution caused by fossil fuel burning. U.S. oil giant ConocoPhillips will lay off up to 25 of its workforce. The New York Times Consumers Artificial Intelligence. When it comes to spotting fake receipts, it is AI versus AI. The New York Times Consumers Clothing Blue Light may help remove food and sweat stains without harsh chemicals. The New York Times Consumers Crime Mitigation. Was your passport lost or stolen while traveling? Here is how to replace it. The New York Times Consumers Exercise. How Aditi Shah, a Peloton yoga instructor, spends her day in the studio. The New York Times Consumers Fashion. How Giorgio Armani conquered Hollywood. The New York Times Consumers Fashion. Want to start sewing your own clothes? Here are some tips. Reviews by Wirecutter. Consumers Food Recipe Lunchbox. Harvest Muffins Recipe. Consumers Housing Interiors. Pewter finds a home in high-end interior decor. The New York Times Consumers Lottery. As Powerball nears record, ticket buyers dream of new houses and winning in secret. The New York Times Consumers New York City restaurants and art museums at Gallery Sardina. Party to remember. The New York Times Democrats opinion. Democrats should let the government shut down. The New York Times Democrats opinion. Free opinion writers on whether Congress can rein in Trump. The New York Times Democrats will Trump have to run from the economy. The New York Times Human Interest. The interview. Green Brown does not want to be your self-help guru anymore. The New York Times Human Interest opinion. Men plus women plus apps equals bad romance. The New York Times Human Interest. Tiny love stories. His private gambling felt like an earthquake. The New York Times Medicine and Science. Preventive health. Consumers, should you switch to an electric toothbrush? Reviews by Wirecutter. Medicine and Science. Preventive health. Consumers. The 4 best light therapy lamps of 2025. Reviews by Wirecutter. Medicine and Science. Health and exercise. Are weighted vests worth the hype? The New York Times Medicine and Science. Could a pill fix the brain? The New York Times Medicine and Science. 3 psychiatric tools that could boost the natural healing of the brain. The New York Times. New York City mayoral race. Adams insists he is running for mayor despite Saudi ambassadorship talks. The New York Times. New York City mayoral race history. A mayor in disrepute saved by an ambassadorship. The year was 1950. The New York Times. Republicans. Consumers. American Eagle sales fall slightly after Sydney Sweeney. At the New York Times Theater, the girls are screaming the New York Times Trump actions opinion. Will the Trump Caesarism last? The New York Times Trump economy, a second week. Jobs report challenges the Trump claim the economy is booming. The New York Times Trump economy. Housing. Why are more millionaires renting homes instead of buying? The New York Times Trump extortion from universities. The George Mason University president Gregory Washington will not apologize to the Trump administration. The New York Times Trump extortion from universities. Harvard University settlement talks stall between Harvard and the Trump administration. The New York Times Trump extortion from universities. What has the Trump administration gotten from law firms and universities? The New York Times. The Caribbean. What to know about a rapid U.S. military buildup in the Caribbean? The New York Times. Guatemala consumers 50 years of promoting jade from Guatemala. The New York Times. Argentina RAWSEP view dictator Milei is a friend of Trump. From the article headline, the Karina Milei mysterious first sister of Argentina. Dictator Milei captivates nation after audio leaks. The New York Times. Australia large shark kills surfer near Sydney. Police say. The New York Times. United Kingdom. The Keir Starmer miserable moment in the UK has right-wing leader Nigel Farage gloating. The New York Times. Europe Trump actions. Trump will host G20 summit in 2026 at his Doral resort. The New York Times. Sweden. What is Swedish culture? IKEA yes. ABBA not this time. The New York Times. Italy. Climate change. Food delivery drivers feel strain of a ban in Italy on outdoor work on hottest days. The New York Times. Iran thrust into the line of fire. Iranians worry about what comes next. The New York Times. China crypto. Would anyone use a Chinese stablecoin? The New York Times. China U.S. is increasingly exposed to Chinese election threats. Lawmakers say. The New York Times. China and Russia and North Korea and India. How the Trump blunt force diplomacy is pushing his rivals together. The New York Times. Japan music. Linda and Linda and again Linda the Lindis. These girls just want to have fun. The New York Times. North Korea Trump actions in 2019. How a top secret SEAL Team 6 mission into North Korea fell apart. The New York Times. Headlines. The Guardian. September 6, 2025. Air pollution caused by wood burning. RAWSEP view air pollution caused by wood burning increases climate change, and climate change increases lightning strikes that cause wood burning wildfire in an interconnected loop. From the article headline, climate crisis will increase frequency of lightning sparked wildfires. Study finds U.S. wildfires. The Guardian. Air pollution caused by wood burning. RAWSEP view air pollution caused by wood burning increases climate change, and climate change increases lightning strikes that cause wood burning wildfire in an interconnected loop. The article is written with a worldwide view. From the article headline, higher defense spending is pointless without climate aid, says UN chief. Climate crisis. The Guardian. Artificial intelligence book copyrights. AI startup Anthropic agrees to pay $1.5 billion to settle book piracy lawsuit. Artificial intelligence. AI. The Guardian. Artificial intelligence errors. ChatGPT offered bomb recipes and hacking tips during safety tests. OpenAI. The Guardian. Consumers. RAWSEP view identifying harmful chemical ingredients when safer alternatives are available. Maha. Mother who truly care about the health of their children should ditch the anti-vaccine destructive political rhetoric and focus on what parents and any other humans can do in the real world to safeguard their children, starting with reading. This article. From the article headline, ingredient red flags. How to spot the chemicals to avoid in food, kitchenware, and cosmetics, health and well-being. The Guardian. Consumers. Artificial intelligence. Melania Trump is right that the robots are here, but she is wrong on how to handle it. Arwa Madawi. The Guardian. Media news. Artificial intelligence existential crisis. How the Google shift to AI has upended the online news model. Newspapers and magazines. The Guardian. Nature week in wildlife. A slow loris, a tiny deer, and a glamorous dumpling squid environment. The Guardian. Oregon Trump actions. Trump apparently misled by video of 2020 protest threatens to send troops to Portland. Donald Trump. The Guardian. RFK Jr. The RFK Jr. anti-science agenda will be catastrophic for the United States. Mustafa Bayami. The Guardian. Trump actions. Right-wing conference reveals muddled lines between Trump and far-right Trump administration. The Guardian. Trump actions. What the is Trump dead? Rumors reveal about our current moment. Trump. The Guardian. Trump actions. Why is much of the media ignoring questions about the Trump health? Margaret Sullivan. The Guardian. Trump economy revisions and rising unemployment. What to know about the U.S. jobs report, U.S. unemployment and employment data. The Guardian. Trump and Epstein fallout. The Jeffrey Epstein cover-up is an affront to U.S. democracy. Rebecca Solnit. The Guardian. Washington, D.C. gun violence stray bullet. 2 teenagers arrested for murder of U.S. congressional intern hit by stray bullets. Washington, D.C. The Guardian. Washington, D.C. sues over the Trump deployment of the National Guard. Washington, D.C. The Guardian. Australia. A great tragedy. Man dies in shark attack near DY on the northern beaches of Sydney. The Guardian. United Kingdom. RAWSEP view ECHR stands for the European Convention on Human Rights. From the article headline, Brexit did not solve the woes of Britain. Woes, but no matter. Leaving the ECHR definitely will sound simple, does not it? Polly Toynbee. The Guardian. United Kingdom. Housing. No pets, no guests, no music, and now no work from home. WFHY. House share ads are getting ever stricter. Kimi Chada. The Guardian. Ukraine. It is a war of drones. Now the ever-evolving tech dominating the front line in Ukraine. The Guardian. India. Blindsided by Trump. Modi is learning hard lessons about the place in the New World Order of India. Mukul Kesavan. The Guardian. China and Russia and South Korea and India. Xi Putin Kim and the optics of a new world order. China. The Guardian. Cat's corner strategy with Tiger and Leone. Saying the quiet part out loud. Roar. Hi, I am Tiger. Our human asked us to get up from our naps and start Cat's corner strategy with Tiger and Leone. She gave us a list of internet allies which we will post for her here.
Hi, I am Leone. It is better for your mental fitness to go to these websites than to go to bro sites for advice. Substack letters from an American Heather Cox Richardson. Substack your local epidemiologist. The Midas Touch. The Guardian. The New York Times.
1. Introduction. RAWSEP view. The United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only for home building and furniture building. For just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions, yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry, and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable, wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree, but it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen, and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut-down and burned tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM 2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lung, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM 2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom, the Eco-Design Wood Stove. An international convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. RAWSEP view. Purple air. PM 2.5 monitors hanging from the eaves of the house of a near neighbor should be used to measure the level of PM 2.5 in the air hyperlocally in the yards of near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners. If PM 2.5 levels exceed World Health Organization standards of 5 micrograms per cubic meter annually, then that evidence of air pollution from wood burning should lead to the shutdown of that indoor residential wood burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary.